It began in silence, the kind of silence only found deep below the surface, where sunlight dies and even thoughts seem to echo. Bushman's Hole, or Bozeman's Gat, as it's known locally, hides in South Africa's northern Cape. From above, it looks like any peaceful watering hole on a farm. Nothing out of place, nothing alarming. But beneath it, a vertical tunnel drops nearly 300 meters straight down, deeper than the Eiffel Tower is tall, deeper than most humans can even imagine venturing. The cave is so remote, so extreme, that more people have walked on the surface of the moon than have reached its bottom. Back in 1994, this cavern claimed a life. Dion Dreyer, just 20 years old, vanished inside it. The official cause was never pinned down completely. Some suspected carbon dioxide buildup. Others whispered about narcosis. His dive team had watched his light disappear into the abyss and never return. The currents didn't drag him away. The cave swallowed him whole. Searches followed. A robotic sub sent by De Beers found only his helmet. No body, no closure. His family waited for years, and eventually they stopped waiting. A plaque was placed at the cave entrance to honor their son. The hole had taken him, and they made peace with that, or at least tried. For Theo and Marie Dreyer, it wasn't just about mourning a son, it was about mourning the unknown. Not having a body meant waking up every day with questions that would never be answered. Did he suffer? Was he scared? Was he still tethered to the cave wall, suspended in the dark? The mind plays tricks when it's left with silence. Birthdays came and went. Friends moved on. Dayon's room stayed untouched for years, as though he might walk back in at any moment. His dive log still open to the last page, his gear packed neatly as if waiting. They made visits to the cave, quiet, reflective moments, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with just tears. The plaque became a kind of grave marker, the still water a tombstone. But still, there was no closure. His mother often said that it felt like her heart had sunk to the bottom of that cave with him. Even as time passed, she'd listen for updates from divers or hold her breath every time someone new entered the cave, hoping for news she was afraid to hear. Bushman's Hole had transformed from a sinkhole into a scar, one that never fully healed. 10 years passed, and still the silence at the bottom of that abyss remained unbroken. Until Dave Shaw arrived. For a decade, that's where the story stayed. Until another diver came along, Dave Shaw. By then, Dave wasn't just a recreational diver, he was something of a legend. Australian by birth, commercial airline pilot by trade. He started diving with his teenage son in the Philippines in the late 90s, and it had become more than a hobby. It was an obsession. But not the shallow water kind. Dave was drawn to depth, to danger, to caves where no natural light could reach. He wasn't interested in reefs and sea turtles. He wanted pressure, risk, silence. He met Don Shirley, a fellow technical diver and former British Army electronics expert in South Africa around 2002. They hit it off. Don ran a dive school at Kamadi Springs, a flooded asbestos mine turned training ground. Over time, Don and Dave logged over 100 hours underwater together. And as with many deep divers, the trust between them became something unspoken. When your life hangs on another man's decisions at 800 feet, words become unnecessary. It wasn't just about depth records or gear talk. Their bond was forged in a world most people will never know. Free-falling into blackness, navigating by torchlight, breathing only because the machine on your back is whispering permission. Every dive was a dialogue without words. A squeeze on the shoulder, a nod, a hand signal that meant the difference between calm and chaos. Don had seen hundreds of divers come and go, but Dave stood out. His discipline, his calm under pressure, his quiet intensity. It was clear he wasn't in it for ego. He was searching for something down there. Maybe it was silence. Maybe it was purpose. Or maybe it was just that impossible pull that deep water has on certain souls. Don once said diving with Dave felt like flying formation. Both men tuned into each other's breathing, rhythm, energy. When they trained, they pushed each other. When they surfaced, they debriefed in that low, matter-of-fact tone that divers use when talking about life and death margins. No drama, just facts and respect, the kind that can't be faked, especially in a place where hesitation can kill you. They weren't just dive buddies, They were tethered by something invisible and unbreakable. In October 2004, Dave and Don arrived at Bushman's Hole. Dave wanted to attempt a rebreather world record to reach depths no diver had ever gone using that system. Rebreathers recycle the air a diver breathes, removing carbon dioxide and adding oxygen back in. They're ideal for long, deep dives but come with serious risks. If something fails, there's no easy bailout. At around 270 meters down, that's nearly 900 feet, Dave made a startling discovery. In the eerie stillness of the cave floor, his flashlight swept over what looked like a face, teeth, a skull, a wetsuit, an entire body, untouched and intact. It was Dion Dreyer. For a moment, Dave knelt next to him, processing what he was seeing. The body hadn't decomposed in the usual way. The cold, fresh water had preserved it. Dion still wore his gear, his mask, his fins, his oxygen tanks, and he was tethered to a dive line. Dave marked the spot with a reel and tied it to Dion's harness before beginning the slow, hours-long ascent. When he surfaced, shaken and tired, his first words were about going back. He was determined to bring Dion out. He'd seen him. Dion was no longer lost, but now there was something to be done. In a way, Dave felt chosen. In later interviews, his partner Don mentioned that Dave had dreamt of finding Dion before he ever did, and when the discovery happened, it mirrored his dream exactly. Same position, same expression. This wasn't just recovery. For Dave, it became a mission. He emailed Dion's parents, told them what he'd seen, offered to return and bring their son home. They hadn't asked for it. In fact, they were stunned. For years, they had let go. But Dave gave them hope. A plan was made, a full team was assembled. Support divers, safety divers, surface crew, even a filmmaker, Gordon Hiles, joined the expedition. Dave's wife, Ann, stitched a custom body bag. It had to be strong enough to contain remains that might fall apart during the ascent. After 10 years in cold water, soft tissue preservation is unpredictable. The plan was to secure the body underwater, seal it in the bag, and pass it from diver to diver up to the surface. The procedure was practiced in a lake a week before the main dive. Don lay at the bottom as a stand-in. Dave rehearsed slipping the bag over a body in limited visibility and tight conditions. Every second counted. Spending too long at depth could trigger a chain reaction of deadly consequences: increased carbon dioxide, oxygen toxicity, narcosis, or equipment failure. The actual dive was scheduled for January 8, 2005. The location was cordoned off by police. In diving terms, this was considered a body recovery, technically a crime scene. At 6:13 a.m., Dave shook Don's hand, smiled, and said he'd be back in 20 minutes. He wasn't bluffing. Everything had been calculated. At 11 minutes into his descent, Dave reached the cave floor and located Dion's body. He pulled out the body bag. Everything was going to plan, until the moment it wasn't. The second Dave tried to place the body into the bag, things started going wrong. A silt cloud burst from the floor, clouding visibility. When it cleared, Dion's body was no longer where it had been. It was floating, and something even more horrifying had happened. The head had separated from the body. Instead of a skeleton, Dave had encountered a corpse preserved into a waxy, soap-like substance, a condition called adiposity, common in freshwater bodies. His arms and legs weren't stiff. They drifted like a puppet. When Dave grabbed the legs to pull them into the bag, they bent unnaturally. He started panting. Breathing rate increased. Carbon dioxide began building in his bloodstream. And then came the critical mistake. Because of the helmet camera, Dave had modified his gear setup. Normally, he kept his flashlight attached to his wrist or neck, but this time he let it float beside him. In the chaos, the light drifted into the dive line. It tangled, and now so did Dave. He tried to cut himself free, reached for shears. Hands trembling, he fumbled in the dark. His breathing worsened. The video footage captured it all. Shallow, rapid breathing. Twitching hands. A man trying to follow protocol as the darkness pressed in. At 5.5 minutes on the cave floor, Dave's movements slowed. Then they stopped. The line had snared his gear. The CO2 had overwhelmed his body. Consciousness faded. There were no bubbles, no ascent, no signal. Don Shirley, waiting 50 meters above at the agreed rendezvous depth, saw Dave's light below. It wasn't moving. No bubbles, no sound. He knew. Still, Don began descending to help, despite knowing it would push his body to its limit. At 243 meters, he heard a cracking sound. His oxygen controller had failed. He could no longer regulate his breathing electronically. Everything had to be done manually, which meant the rescue attempt was over. If Don pushed further, he'd join his friend in death. He turned, began the hours-long ascent, battling dizziness, nausea, and at one point, spinning vertigo. A helium bubble had formed in his inner ear. For 12 hours and 32 minutes, Don remained in the water, decompressing. Eventually, he was pulled out and taken straight into a recompression chamber. It took him over a month to fully regain his balance. Back at the surface, the dive team watched and waited. Time ticked by. Divers sent slates with messages. One surfaced with a grim sentence: "Dave not coming back." And then, days later, something unexpected happened. As support divers cleaned up, one looked into the water and saw something. Two shapes, floating, entangled. It was Dave and Dion together. Shaw's body pinned to the cave ceiling by an inflated buoyancy bag. Dion, headless, just beneath. The flashlight that caused the entanglement was still looped through the guideline. When the team pulled the line, the bodies came up too. Dave had, in a way, completed the mission. He had brought Dion back, but the cost was his life. The helmet camera revealed the final moments in grim detail. The footage was later analyzed by Don. In an attempt to understand exactly what his friend had experienced, he mimicked the breathing rate while watching the video. Using medical sensors, he discovered that Dave had hyperventilated to the point of unconsciousness. If this powerful, haunting story moved you, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check out more real-life tales of courage and tragedy from the edge of human capability.